I never thought I'd actually do something like this, but honestly, my family pushed me way too far this time. Some background. I've always been the disappointment in my family. Even though I'm doing fine for myself, I have my own place, a decent job designing outdoor spaces, and I pay my bills on time. But according to my parents, I was supposed to be some kind of financial wizard, like my dad always wanted to be, but never was. My sister Brooke went into finance, and my brother Peter became an accountant, so they're the golden children. Meanwhile, I'm the black sheep because I prefer plants to spreadsheets. 3 days before Father's Day, I was at home playing Elden Ring when my phone lit up with Dad's name. I almost didn't answer because our calls always end with him asking for money or telling me how I've failed him. But whatever, I picked up. Dad didn't even say hello. He just said I shouldn't bother coming to Father's Day dinner unless I brought $20,000 with me. I literally laughed because I thought he was joking. When I asked what for, he said, "For being my son. It's been expensive and disappointing." Then I heard Mom in the background going, "Tell him about the interest." And Dad was like, "Right, 26 years of disappointment. With interest, you owe $50,000. Before I could even process that, my sister Brooke grabbed the phone saying she'd calculated how my failure cost them social standing in their country club. That was another $10,000. Then my brother Peter chimed in about therapy costs for dealing with having me as a brother, $5,000. Mom got back on the line, totaling it up, $65,000, due on Father's Day. I was just silent. Then I started laughing. I said, okay, everything would be ready, but it would be even better than money. They got all excited. Dad said, finally, he's manning up. Mom kept saying I knew threats would work. Brooke was wondering if I'd won the lottery, and Peter asked if I'd robbed a bank. What they didn't know was this wasn't the first time they'd pulled this kind of shit. When I got my first job at 16, Dad borrowed my first 3 paychecks for family expenses, but bought himself a new set of golf clubs. When I got my graduation money from relatives, $2,500, Mom invested it for me, but actually used it for a spa weekend with her friends. And after I started my career, they constantly guilted me into helping out with their bills, home repairs, car payments, literally thousands over the years. The worst part? While they were taking my money, they'd tell everyone how disappointed they were in me, how I was barely scraping by, how I couldn't manage my finances. Meanwhile, they were driving a Lexus ES I helped pay for. So for the next 3 days, I didn't sleep much. I went through all my bank statements from the past 8 years. Credit card records, Venmo history, every check I'd written them, every cash withdrawal followed by texts from them thanking me for the help. I made a spreadsheet of everything. It totaled over $120,000. I had receipts, transfer confirmations, their thank you texts, everything. While I was doing this, they kept texting me about Father's Day. Mom sent a group message saying they were planning a special dinner to celebrate Joseph's contribution to the family. Brooke messaged that she was proud I was finally taking responsibility. Peter sent links to expensive watches saying Dad would expect something nice with all that money. I printed everything out, the spreadsheet, the proof, the texts, where they'd promised to pay me back someday, photos of the things they'd bought with my money. I put it all in a black envelope. Father's Day arrived. I drove to their house in my 2013 Subaru Forester that I'm still making payments on while they're driving cars I helped buy. They all looked super excited when I walked in. Dad literally rubbed his hands together when he saw the black envelope. "Is this a check?" he asked, reaching for it greedily. I smiled and said it was better. "Open it." He tore it open and pulled out the contents. The look on his face, confused, then shocked, then horrified, was honestly worth every penny they'd taken from me. The papers slipped from his hands. Mom picked them up and screamed when she saw what it was. Brooke tried grabbing the papers from Mom while Peter just stood there with his mouth hanging open. "What is this?" Dad finally managed to say. "It's an itemized receipt," I said, "for the $120,837 I've already given you over the years, plus interest." Mom started shaking her head. "That's not possible. We never—" I cut her off. "It's all there. Every transfer, every check, every cash withdrawal, with dates, amounts, and what you claimed it was for, plus screenshots of your thank you texts." Dad tried changing tactics. "Son, we've given you everything, raised you, fed you, and I've already paid you back. More than paid you back," I said. "In fact, according to my calculations, you owe me about $55,000 in remaining balance." Brooke started yelling that I was making it all up. Peter was frantically flipping through the pages, probably checking my math. It was perfect. Mom started crying, those fake tears she always uses to manipulate me. I just stood there, calm as anything. I've also included a notice that I'm cutting off all financial support, effective immediately. "You can't do this." Dad slammed his fist on the table, making the fancy china rattle. China I probably paid for. Already done, I said. I've closed the joint account you had access to. I've canceled the credit card you were using. And I've informed Grandma about how you've been treating me. That last bit made Mom go pale. Grandma was her mother, and the source of most of their social standing. She was also the only person in the family who ever believed in me. Dad started threatening me, said I'd regret this, said no one would believe me, said I was nothing without the family. I just laughed and walked toward the door. Enjoy your Father's Day. The receipt's my gift. I figured you'd want to know exactly how much your son is worth. As I was walking out, I heard things crashing behind me. Dad was throwing stuff. Mom was sobbing. Brooke was screaming that I was ruining everything. I got in my car, hands shaking but feeling stronger than I ever have. I drove away without looking back. This was 3 days ago. My phone has been blowing up with messages from all of them, alternating between threats and begging. I haven't responded to any of it. And honestly, for the first time in my life, I feel like I'm worth something. Update 1. Hey everyone. I honestly didn't expect my post to get so much attention, but I appreciate all the support. A lot has happened in the past week since Father's Day, and I need to get this off my chest. So the day after I dropped my receipt bomb, as my friend called it, I woke up to 47 missed calls and about 100 texts. I put my phone on Do Not Disturb after posting last time because I just needed one night of peace. The messages started with threats. Dad saying I'd regret this and how I was dead to the family. LOL, as if that's a punishment. Mom switching between crying emojis and telling me I was killing her with stress. Brooke sending paragraph-long texts about how I was tearing the family apart over a few loans. Peter was the only one who didn't immediately attack. He just sent, "We need to talk." By afternoon, they changed tactics. Dad texted that there was a misunderstanding, and they were just testing me to see if I valued family. Mom claimed she had chest pains from the stress and might need to go to the hospital. She pulls this every time she doesn't get her way. Brooke sent a voice message saying, maybe we could negotiate a lower amount. I didn't respond to any of it. Tuesday morning, I was working from home when someone started pounding on my apartment door. I checked through the peephole and saw my parents standing there. Dad was red-faced and Mom was doing her fake crying thing. I opened the door but blocked the entrance. Dad immediately tried to push past me, but I stood my ground. He started yelling about how I was ungrateful and had no idea what they'd sacrificed for me. Mom was sobbing about how I was breaking her heart and she'd never recover from this betrayal. The whole time I just stood there silently until Dad ran out of steam. Then I asked, very calmly, if they'd brought the $55,000 they owed me. That set him off again. What they didn't realize was that my neighbor across the hall, cool older lady who brings me cookies sometimes, had her door cracked open listening to the whole thing. Dad was screaming so loud the entire floor could hear him. Finally, I told them they needed to leave or I'd call building security. Dad got in my face and said I was nothing without them, that they'd made me everything I was. I laughed and said, yeah, that's why I'm still paying off student loans while you're driving the car I helped buy. Mom tried a different approach, saying she was worried about my mental health and maybe I needed therapy. Rich, coming from the woman who told me therapy was for weak people when I was struggling with depression in college. I told her I'd been in therapy for 2 years already, working through the damage they caused. That shut them up for a second. Then Dad threatened to tell everyone in the family what an ungrateful son I was. I just shrugged and said, already beat you to it. See, after Father's Day, I texted my grandma, 2 uncles, and 3 cousins I'm close with. I didn't send them the full spreadsheet, just explained the situation and that I'd been financially supporting my parents for years while they continued to ask for more. What Dad didn't know is that he's been trash-talking me to the extended family for years, telling everyone I was barely scraping by, couldn't hold a job, always asking them for money. Meanwhile, the reality was the complete opposite. So when I told them the truth with proof, they were shocked but not entirely surprised. Dad has a history of exaggerating and lying. After my parents left, Dad kicked my door on the way out. I got a call from my Uncle Steve, Dad's brother. He told me something I never knew. Dad's business has been failing for years. He started it after getting fired from his corporate job, another thing I never knew. And it's been on life support ever since. And guess who's been anonymously keeping it afloat? Me. See, 2 years ago, Mom asked me to help with a special family project. She set up an arrangement where I'd deposit money monthly into an account for family emergencies. I agreed because despite everything, I didn't want them to lose their house. I thought the money was going toward their mortgage. Nope. According to Uncle Steve, most of that money was keeping Dad's business from collapsing. The business he constantly brags about. The business he uses to shame me about my mediocre career. I immediately called my bank and canceled all recurring transfers to that account. Then I contacted the family attorney who helped me set up my LLC last year and asked what I needed to do to formally document that I would no longer be providing financial support to my family. By Thursday, things escalated again. I was at a coffee shop working when Brooke showed up. How did she know where I was? I check in on Venmo when I pay, and we're still connected there. Immediately fixed that. Brooke sat down without asking and started talking in her reasonable business voice about how I was overreacting. She had her own spreadsheet claiming most of the money I'd documented was actually family investments or loans that were being paid back in non-monetary ways. When I asked for proof, she just waved her hand dismissively. Then she dropped the real reason she was there. Dad's business supplier was demanding payment by the end of the month, and they needed $8,000. Without my monthly contributions, they couldn't make it. I told her that wasn't my problem anymore. Brooke's face changed completely. She leaned in and hissed that if Dad's business failed, it would be my fault, that I'd be destroying our family's reputation, that Mom might have a real health crisis from the stress. I just stared at her and said, the same way it was my fault when Dad took my first paychecks, my fault when Mom invested my graduation money, my fault when they demanded $65,000 for the privilege of being their son. She didn't have an answer for that, just grabbed her designer purse, probably bought with my money, and stormed out. Friday brought the biggest shock. Peter texted asking to meet privately. I was suspicious but agreed to meet at a public park. When he showed up, he looked terrible, like he hadn't slept in days. He sat down and admitted something I never expected. Dad and Mom had been doing the same thing to him, just on a smaller scale. As the successful son, he was expected to contribute to family expenses, invest in Dad's business, and maintain the family image. The difference was they praised him publicly while taking his money, whereas with me, they took my money and trashed me to everyone. Peter showed me his own spreadsheet. Accountants, I swear, tracking about $40,000 he'd given them over 3 years. He asked how I finally got the courage to stand up to them. I told him I just got tired of being treated like an ATM while being called a failure. This morning, I woke up to an email from Dad. The subject line was, "Final warning." I almost didn't open it, but curiosity got the better of me. It was a formal-looking letter stating that if I didn't resume financial support, he would be forced to take measures to protect the family reputation. Specifically, he threatened to contact my clients and tell them I was unstable and unreliable. He doesn't know that I've already contacted everyone I work with regularly to warn them they might receive strange calls or emails from my family. I explained I was dealing with a personal situation and apologized for any awkwardness. My boss was surprisingly understanding and said they'd ignore any contact attempts. So now I'm waiting for Dad's next move. I've blocked my parents on everything, but kept Brooke and Peter unblocked to monitor the situation. Peter seems to be wavering between family loyalty and realizing how messed up everything is. The most satisfying part? I checked my bank account today. Without the drain of supporting my family, my balance is the highest it's been in years. I'm actually going to be able to make a double payment on my car this month. Dad always said I was financially irresponsible. Turns out I was just financially exploited. Update 2. Shit just got real, y'all. Thanks for all the support on my last posts. This situation has gone from family drama to full-on war, and honestly, I'm done playing nice. So remember how my dad threatened to contact my clients? Well, he actually followed through. 2 days after my last update, I got a call from my biggest client asking if everything was okay. Apparently, my dad had called them claiming to be concerned about my mental health and suggesting they might want to reconsider our working relationship. He even sent them an email with a bunch of old photos of me from college, at parties, looking drunk, trying to paint me as unreliable. Luckily, the warning I'd given my clients paid off. They forwarded me everything and basically told me not to worry about it. My client actually laughed about it, saying it was obvious my dad was the unstable one. But I was furious. This wasn't just family drama anymore. This was my livelihood. I immediately called my attorney, the one who helped with my LLC, and asked what my options were. He said while I could potentially sue for defamation, it would be messy and expensive. But he did suggest I send a formal cease and desist letter, which we drafted that afternoon. The letter explicitly stated that any further attempts to contact my clients or employer would result in legal action. While at the attorney's office, I remembered something important. 2 years ago, I helped my dad buy a commercial mower and some other equipment for his business. We split the cost 70/30ths, with me paying the 70%, of course. But the agreement we signed said I was the legal owner until he paid me back, which he never did. My attorney confirmed that I had every right to reclaim that equipment, So I sent my dad a formal notice that he had 7 days to either pay me in full for the equipment, about $11,000, or return it to me. The response was immediate. Dad called me screaming that I was trying to destroy him, that he needed that equipment for jobs he had scheduled. I calmly reminded him that he had signed an agreement and had 7 days to figure it out. The next day, Peter called me. He sounded stressed, saying Dad was on a rampage, throwing things and yelling that I was sabotaging the family. Mom was having one of her episodes where she takes to her bed claiming physical symptoms from stress. Brooke was apparently trying to find investors to save the business from me. Peter asked if we could talk in person again. I was hesitant, but agreed to meet at the same park. When I got there, Peter wasn't alone. Brooke was with him. My first instinct was to leave, but something about their expressions made me stay. Turns out, they'd been comparing notes about how Mom and Dad had manipulated both of them financially. Brooke admitted that when she was calculating my social standing debt, Mom had promised her a $5,000 commission if they got the money from me. She also revealed that Dad had been bad-mouthing me to clients for years, telling people not to hire me because I was unstable, even while taking my money. I wasn't surprised, but hearing it still pissed me off. We talked for almost 2 hours, and I showed them the cease and desist letter and the equipment repossession notice. Peter thought I was being harsh, but Brooke surprised me by saying it was about time someone stood up to them. She then dropped another bomb. Dad had been using equipment from his business at Uncle Steve's property for years, claiming it was a family discount, but actually charging Uncle Steve full price and pocketing the difference. This explained why Dad was so desperate to keep the equipment. He was running side jobs and hiding the income. That weekend was Grandma's 80th birthday dinner. I'd been planning to skip it, but now I decided to go. Brooke, Peter, and I agreed not to cause a scene, but we wouldn't lie if anyone asked questions either. The dinner was at my aunt's house. When I walked in, the room literally went quiet. Dad glared at me from across the room. Mom suddenly looked ill and had to sit down. Grandma, though, came right over and hugged me. Throughout dinner, I could tell Dad had been working the room. Several relatives kept giving me strange looks or awkward pats on the shoulder saying things like, "It'll be okay," or "Families go through rough patches." I just smiled and ate my food. Then Uncle Steve, who was slightly drunk, loudly asked Dad how business was going, now that Joseph isn't bankrolling you anymore. The table went dead silent. Dad tried to laugh it off, saying I'd helped with small loans, but was exaggerating the amounts. That's when I pulled out my phone, opened my spreadsheet, and slid it across the table to Grandma. "Small loans don't add up to $120,000, Dad," I said. Grandma's eyes went wide as she scrolled through the list. She passed the phone to my aunt, who gasped. Dad started stammering about how it wasn't what it looked like, that I was twisting things. That's when Peter spoke up. He confirmed that Mom and Dad had been taking his money too and lying about what it was for. Brooke, surprisingly, backed us up. Dad completely lost it. He stood up, knocking over his chair, and started yelling that we were all ungrateful and trying to ruin him. He pointed at me and screamed that I owed him everything, that without him I'd be nothing. I just calmly replied, "Then why did you need $120,000 from nothing?" Several people actually snorted or covered their mouths. Dad's face went from red to purple. Mom started crying dramatically. Grandma stood up, she's tiny but mighty, and told Dad to lower his voice in her presence. He actually tried to argue with her, which was the final straw for everyone. Aunt Marissa, who's always been the peacekeeper, firmly suggested that my parents leave. When Dad refused, Uncle Steve and another uncle physically escorted him out, while he continued shouting threats. The aftermath was intense. Several family members came up to apologize for believing Dad's stories about me being a failure. Grandma hugged me again and whispered that she'd always known something wasn't right with how they treated me. When I got home that night, I had a text from Dad. "We need to talk. Just you and me. Tomorrow. This has gone too far." I didn't respond right away. Part of me wanted to tell him to go to hell, but another part was curious about what he could possibly say at this point. The next morning, I got a notification from my bank. Someone had tried to access my account multiple times unsuccessfully. I immediately called the bank, and they confirmed the attempts came from an IP address I didn't recognize. They helped me lock everything down and change my password. Later that day, Peter called to tell me Dad was telling everyone he was going to expose my secrets at the upcoming family reunion in 2 weeks. What secrets? I have no idea. But knowing my dad, he's probably making something up out of desperation. Meanwhile, the 7-day period for returning the equipment was almost up. I hadn't heard anything about payment, so I arranged for a truck and some friends to help me collect what was legally mine. The night before the deadline, I finally responded to Dad's text, telling him I'd meet him at a coffee shop the next day. His response was immediate. "Good. I always knew you'd come to your senses." "Yeah, right. What he doesn't know is that I'm meeting him after I reclaim my equipment. And I've got one more surprise for him that I've been saving. See, 3 years ago, I discovered Dad had been using my social security number to open credit cards. I shut it down immediately and froze my credit, but I kept all the documentation. I never said anything because I was still under his spell back then, still desperate for his approval. But now I'm bringing everything: the credit card fraud, the equipment contracts, the bank records, the defamation attempts. No more Mr. Nice Son. Final update. Hey everyone, this is probably my final update on the whole family financial nightmare situation. A lot has happened in the past couple weeks, and honestly, I'm kinda exhausted but also weirdly at peace for the first time in forever. So first things first, the equipment repossession. The morning after my last post, me and two friends showed up at Dad's storage unit where he keeps his business equipment. I had all the paperwork proving I legally owned it, plus a copy of the original agreement where he promised to pay me back. LOL. We brought a rented pickup truck and planned to take the commercial mower, leaf blower, edger, and some other stuff, all together worth about $11,000. I half expected Dad to be there waiting, but the place was empty. We loaded everything up pretty quickly. Just as we were finishing, this beat-up Toyota pulled in. It was my dad's assistant, Eugene. He started freaking out, saying we couldn't take the equipment because Dad had jobs scheduled that afternoon. I showed him the paperwork and told him Dad had been given 7 days' notice. Eugene just stood there looking panicked, then called my dad. I could literally hear Dad screaming through the phone from like 10 feet away. Eugene handed me the phone with this, "Please don't kill the messenger" look. Dad was threatening to call the cops for theft. I just laughed and reminded him that I had the signed contract proving I owned the equipment until he paid me back. Then I hung up and we finished loading everything. As we were pulling away, Dad's Lexus came screeching into the lot. He jumped out and actually tried to block the truck with his body, like some weird game of chicken. I told my friend to stop. Didn't want Dad getting hurt, despite everything. Dad came around to my window, face all red, and started banging on it. I rolled it down a little, and he immediately tried to reach in and grab me. I rolled it back up, trapping his fingers for a second until he yanked them out. After like 5 minutes of him yelling and us just sitting there, I called the police non-emergency line and explained the situation. They sent an officer who checked our paperwork, confirmed I was the legal owner, and told Dad to back off or he'd be arrested for disorderly conduct. Dad kept arguing with the cop until he threatened to cuff him. Finally, Dad backed down. But as we drove away, he shouted that this wasn't over. Later that afternoon, I met Dad at the coffee shop as planned. I got there early and chose a table in the corner where we could talk without the whole place hearing. I also asked my friend to sit a few tables away just in case things got ugly. He pretended to be working on his laptop. Dad showed up 15 minutes late looking like hell. Unshaven, wrinkled clothes, bags under his eyes. He sat down without ordering anything and immediately started with the guilt trip. How could I do this to my own father? Didn't I realize I was destroying the family? What would people think? I just sat there sipping my coffee while he ranted. When he finally ran out of steam, I placed a folder on the table between us. Inside was everything: the complete financial records, the credit card statements showing he'd used my SSN, the cease and desist letter, and something new: printouts of the emails he'd sent to my clients trying to sabotage me. Dad flipped through it, his face changing from angry to worried. When he got to the credit card fraud evidence, he closed the folder and pushed it away like it was radioactive. Then he tried a new approach. His voice got all quiet and sad. He said he'd always been proud of me but didn't know how to show it. That he'd been under immense pressure trying to make his business succeed. That Mom had expensive tastes and he couldn't say no to her. That he'd planned to pay me back once things turned around. I asked why, if he was so proud of me. He told everyone I was a failure. Why he demanded $65,000 for raising me. Why he tried to ruin my reputation when I stopped giving him money. He didn't have answers for any of that. Just more excuses. Then I played my trump card. I took out my phone and played a recording. It was a conversation between him and Mom from 2 years ago that Peter had secretly recorded and just recently shared with me. In it, Dad was laughing about how easy it was to milk Joseph for cash, while Mom worried someone might find out. Dad assured her that I was too desperate for approval to ever stand up to them. Dad's face went completely white. He grabbed for my phone, but I pulled it away. He hissed that I was recording him illegally. I pointed out that Peter had made the recording, not me. And in our state, only one party needs to consent. That's when Dad's whole demeanor changed. He sat back, suddenly calm, and said, "What do you want?" I told him I wanted 3 things. A signed acknowledgement that I had financially supported him and Mom for years, including exact amounts. His promise to never contact me or my clients again. a public statement to the family admitting he had lied about me being a financial failure. Dad laughed and asked why he would ever agree to that. I said because if he didn't, I'd report the credit card fraud to the police and the credit bureaus. Yes, the statute of limitations might have passed on some of it, but the investigation would expose all his financial dealings, including the side jobs he was doing for cash that he probably wasn't reporting on his taxes. The look on his face told me I'd hit a nerve. He stood up so fast his chair tipped over. People turned to stare as he pointed at me and said I was no longer his son, that I was dead to him. Then he stormed out, bumping into tables on his way. I honestly expected that reaction. Dad's pride would never let him admit what he'd done. But I wasn't done yet. The next day was Sunday dinner at Grandma's, a monthly tradition. I hadn't planned to go, but Peter texted saying I should. When I arrived, almost the entire extended family was there, including Mom, Dad, Brooke, and Peter. Dad refused to look at me. Mom dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. The tension was so thick you could cut it with a knife. During dinner, Uncle Steve brought up Dad's business troubles, asking if losing the equipment had affected his jobs. Before Dad could answer, I spoke up. I explained exactly why I had reclaimed the equipment, because I had paid for 70% of it with a written agreement that Dad would repay me, which he never did. Dad tried to interrupt, but Grandma shot him a look that shut him up. I continued, explaining the whole financial history, how I'd supported them for years while they told everyone I was a failure. I passed around copies of my spreadsheet. Then Peter stood up. I expected him to defend Dad, but instead he confirmed everything I said and added his own experiences. Brooke, surprisingly, backed us up too. She admitted that she had calculated the social standing debt because Mom promised her a cut of whatever they got from me. Dad exploded. He slammed his hands on the table and shouted that we were all conspiring against him, that we were ungrateful, disloyal, pathetic. Mom tried to calm him down, but he shoved her hand away. That's when Grandma spoke up. In her quiet but firm voice, she told Dad that she'd heard enough, that she was ashamed of how he and Mom had treated their children, that this behavior would stop now. Dad tried to argue, but Grandma cut him off. She reminded him that she owned the house they lived in, something I didn't know, that she had been helping them financially for years because Dad had told her his business was struggling and the kids weren't helping, that she had been planning to leave Dad a significant inheritance but was now reconsidering. The room went dead silent. Dad looked like he'd been slapped. Mom started crying for real this time. Grandma then did something amazing. She stood up, came over to me, and hugged me in front of everyone. She thanked me for having the courage to expose the truth. Then she went back to her seat and calmly continued eating her dinner like nothing had happened. Dad got up and left without another word. Mom followed him, still crying. The rest of us sat in awkward silence for a minute before conversation slowly resumed. After dinner, Peter and I talked on Grandma's porch. He told me Dad's business was basically finished without the equipment, that their house, Grandma's house, had a second mortgage Dad had taken out without Grandma's knowledge, that he and Brooke had decided to stop giving Mom and Dad money too. 2 days later, I got a text from Brooke saying Dad and Mom were moving to Florida to live with Mom's sister. They were selling what was left of the business to pay off debts. Dad still refused to sign my acknowledgement, but at this point I didn't care anymore. His reputation in the family was destroyed. His business was gone. His lies were exposed. Yesterday, I had dinner with Peter, Brooke, and Grandma. It was weird but nice. We talked about normal stuff, movies, Grandma's garden, Peter's new apartment. Nobody mentioned Mom and Dad until the end, when Grandma said something that really stuck with me. Family isn't about blood or obligation. It's about respect and trust. We're still a family, just a smaller, healthier one now. So that's where things stand. Dad and Mom are gone. I've got my equipment back, already sold it to another local company. My bank accounts are secure. My clients still trust me. And for the first time in my adult life, I'm not sending half my paycheck to support people who never appreciated it. Honestly, it feels fucking amazing. I've learned that standing up for yourself isn't selfish. That family doesn't get a free pass to abuse you. And that sometimes the best revenge isn't some elaborate scheme. It's just finally saying no and meaning it. Thanks for all the support, Reddit. Couldn't have done this without you.